Okay, so welcome to your next lesson in the course on cognitive biases, the cognitive tendencies, the heuristics, the logical fallacies, the allures, whatever you want to call them. We today are here to talk about that one, the resemblance bias, sometimes known as the appearance bias. Just like many of the biases, it can be called many different things. As I go over the definition and examples, if you've heard it called something else, you'll know which one we're talking about. Frame control is also part of this. There may be such a thing as the frame control bias. We'll get to that. That has a lot to do with resemblance bias. But let's go ahead and define what is resemblance bias. Well, resemblance bias basically says things that look like or sound like or behave like or can be described like other things will sometimes and a lot of times be mistaken for those things or given the same sort of like credit or same attention as those other things, right? It's one of those, if it looks like a duck and it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's a duck kind of things. Okay, but this one is related to the familiarity bias. Yes, but the way that it is different is the resemblance bias, to me, is more about that when you resemble something, it's a little bit more intense. Okay, familiarity bias is like, oh, okay, so I've driven a car before. I used to drive, like, I don't know, a Honda Accord or something, and now someone's trying to sell me a Toyota Camry. Well, familiarity bias will kick in, and you're going to be like, okay, I understand that. I understand what a car is, and these are comparable. They're both, I don't know, mid-sized sedans or something. And then you're going to be like, okay, yeah, that's familiar. Now, if somebody came up to you and they were like, hey, this is, you used to own a Honda Accord, let me sell you a train. You're going to be like, okay, that's not familiar enough, right? Now, just as that is silly in that direction, sometimes you can go too similar, right? And then things they'll seem like the same thing. So, for example, let's say you went to a car lot or something and there was a 2020 and a 2021 Honda Accord. Well, I believe those two are the same kind of body style. If not, you can just say two same cars, different same body styles, but different years, like 1 year apart or something. And they were trying to sell you them as if they were the same thing. Resemblance bias would kick in. You'd be like, oh, I'm looking at them. They look exactly the same. Or imagine it was two 2020 Honda Accords or something, but one of them had 100,000 miles on it, but the body was in perfect shape, and you never got to look on the inside or any of that. Resemblance bias would kick in, and you'll be like, that's the same exact thing. Well, actually, of course, it is not. Because one of them is worth a lot less money because it already has 100,000 miles on it, and the other one has like 0 miles, right? So, resemblance bias is more like that. Then familiarity bias is more like, okay, it looks similar, but there's differences. But familiarity basically says, and I do a whole talk on that one. You can look at that one if there's any sort of like a dispute on this bias, the resemblance bias and the familiarity bias. But remember, resemblance bias is more like, it's like more, like I said, intense in the similarity. Okay? And that's where we can get tripped up a little bit. Here's why. Is because when you see a bunch of people, for example, that people like to do this with groups of people. You see somebody like me, for example, you see somebody who has tanned skin or something, and they look like they might be from some Spanish-speaking nation or something, and you go, oh, automatically, oh, well, they're Spanish. Maybe they're not. They could be Native American. They could be like Samoan. They could be like maybe from the Middle East or something. There's plenty of tan people around, okay? Hopefully nobody's offended by that. I used myself as the example. But resemblance bias will say, especially, let's say that I was Samoan, right? And I have a bunch of Mexican friends or something, and I'm hanging around with them. Resemblance bias would basically say that you would think that we're all pretty much the same. The brain just does that. This isn't talking about like the prejudices or any of those things. The brain likes to collect together things that look similar, especially if they're near each other, because when you were a baby, you had to make relations. When you were looking at your mom, this is what science says, that the brain made relations because every time you saw your mom, you saw her from a different angle. And you had to be able to take all those pictures and put them together and say, this is all the same thing, even though they're a little bit different. So that, what I just explained right there, is kind of why resemblance and familiarity bias exist. Now, resemblance is when you take it a little too far. Let's put an example on the board here. Okay, here's you. Let's say you are right here. Okay? This is going to be an example of, no, okay, we'll do this one first. Okay, so here's you. Let's say you are a spy. Okay, you Spy. All right, let's say you're a spy for America, and we're going to use currently at least, I don't know if you're seeing this 50 years from now, anything could change. We're going to use another nation that is currently friendly with us, just as an example, so you can see kind of how silly this is. So you're from, do my best to draw America here. Heck yeah, man. You're from America, and right here, let's say the enemy nation. This is actually, for those of you that want to be completely correct, that's the United States. So, let's say that the enemy that you're spying on is England, okay? And here is England. There we go, England. I'm not even going to try to draw that one, because I don't remember how it goes. Anyways, that's England, and this is what you do. You're like, okay, we want to go over to England, we want to spy on, I don't know, whatever there is to spy on, because they're getting kind of irritating to us or whatever, and we want to, maybe they develop some technology that we want some insider information on. So here's you go to England, right? Here you go. Go to England to find some new information on these Brits, man. You're a Yankee here, you're going over and hanging out with these Brits. Now, if you do not use the resemblance bias properly, they're gonna know you're there. So you do not want to roll up in England, especially in one of their assemblies or anything to where they're doing anything political, and come in there with this huge thick American accent, and you're wearing what if you were wearing you ever see those top hats that people wear sometimes during what is it called, during Independence Day and stuff, and it's got all the stars on it, and I realize the stars are supposed to be white, just, I don't have a white marker, right? Just, bear with me here. So you roll up in there with one of those, you got your little American flag. Y'all ever see those little, well, it's kind of square. Y'all ever see the little handheld American flags that they have for Independence Day? You can stick them in your yard and stuff. You got that. You come in there yeah, I love America and stuff like this, and you're sitting down with all these people, and you're trying to impersonate an English politician or something like that. Do you see what I'm saying? Is that going to fool them? No, because that is using the resemblance bias the wrong way. You're doing the opposite of resemblance, right? You got to get the language down quick. This is how real spies work, right? You got to get the language and the accent and the colloquialisms and all of those things down perfectly. Down to you got to have your whole background. If people ask you, oh, where are you from? Where'd you grow up? You don't want to say Montgomery, Alabama, right? You'd probably want to say London or something, or whatever, someplace like that. Does that make sense? Otherwise, they're gonna see by the by the law of the resemblance bias that they're this dude, he's not even familiar. Obviously, that's the enemy, right? You can take this back in time to the Revolutionary War or something if you want, if it makes more sense there. I don't know if we had all the little American flags and the top hats with all the, with the flag embroidered on it, and the clothes sometimes people wear those they're just really into the spirit of Independence Day or something. You see it on cartoons a lot too. So if there isn't such a thing, imagine you're wearing that and you try to go there and spy, that you're going to be found out. People are going to know. Resemblance bias says, no, dude, what you need to do, you need to lose the hat, lose the flag, lose the America, right? You need to get rid of all of that stuff, start talking more proper, start speaking the Queen's English, man, and you need to have you a cup of tea and whatever else they do. You need to understand the colloquialisms. It's not enough just to have the accent. That'll get you in the door, but you gotta obviously have been living there for some time. And if you haven't, which if you're a spy, you probably haven't, then what do you gotta do? You gotta practice. And by doing that, then you'll resemble them enough that you'll be able to slip under the radar and get whatever intel, or you're a spy, man. It might not even be something that's national security or anything. You might be like, dude, these people came up with a new tea or something. Let's say it's that. You're coming over here to find this new tea they have and to steal some of it so we can grow it over here in America, right? And not have to pay them for it or whatever it is. But you're never going to get past everybody. You're going to get arrested and stuff if you come in here doing this, and this is an enemy nation or something like that. So you got to resemble them. And it's not enough to be familiar. You can't just have a pretty good English accent, because if you don't understand things like all their different, like I said, colloquialisms, their customs, their like values, and all of those bits of detail that you pick up when you live somewhere for a while, right? Then if you can't, like y'all ever seen that Family Guy episode to where they're giving Peter Griffin that test about, like, okay, a real American would be able to complete this phrase. America is the land of the free, home of the, and he goes, home of the Whopper? Right? Obviously it's home of the brave. Now, people outside of America wouldn't necessarily know that. You gotta know those things if you want to take resemblance bias and be able to be a spy here and take their tea, right? So that we can have whatever the newest tea that was recently discovered and what didn't exist before somehow, and bring it back across the pond, right, over here to America. That's your mission. You are not going to complete it if you don't resemble them enough. Now, frame control, what is that? Frame control basically is the setting. It's more than that, but it's like the setting that you're in that controls how you are behaving and how you are thinking even. There's that, you probably heard this before, that if people are voting on an issue and they vote in the place where the issue is going to, that's going to affect that. For example, if you're voting for rights for schools or more government funding for schools, and they do the voting inside a school, they have controlled the frame, right? And the frame tells them that, hey, this is important. Look, it's right here all around you. Same thing with this. If you go over to England, the frame is like, hey, you need to act like you're British, man. Or at least from like the area or something like that. You can't act like you're from here if the thing you don't want them to know is that you're from here, right? So that is what is important. Frame control is like, okay, everything in this frame, this is a much different frame than this. Everything that's part of that frame, we need to control the way we behave in order to keep up that resemblance bias. Okay, silly example, I know, but this right here will help you remember what that is. Now, if you are in the premium version of this course, this is like the entry level one that we go over everything really quickly. If you're in the premium version, we go over this in much more depth. This one is a little bit harder to explain in such little time, but there is a good example for resemblance bias for you and frame control. I hope you liked it, and we will see you in the next one.